This is from the right-hand side of the truck, so it has right-hand threads. This is on our left side, driver's side, has left-hand threads.
Few of the wheel studs were actually stripped, and the inner cap nut, the part that holds the inner dual on the butt wheel, was loose on the main stud, so you couldn't get everything torqued up properly. So I pulled the back wheels off, go ahead and address this issue, try to figure out, do we have some stripped threads on the studs, on the inner cap nuts? Let's dive into it and see what we find.
So our new wheel studs came in. We're ready to put this guy back together. You can see the new one that actually has threads and the old one that used to have threads. This is from the right-hand side of the truck, so it has right-hand threads. This is on our left side, driver's side, has left-hand threads. Originally, I thought we were just going to change these studs back to the length they were, fix the stripped ones, put together. Then I started thinking about it. Hey, maybe these studs are too short because this thing has all aluminum wheels. Maybe it was set up for steel wheels on the inside. Someone converted it, didn't increase the length of the stud.
So after doing all this work, swapping wheels, swapping tires around, converting to steel inners, we came to the conclusion that that doesn't help you. And I'll show you the difference. So this is the inner cap nut for a steel wheel, and this is the inner cap nut for an aluminum wheel. Now this one here is for a steel because it's shorter, where this one is for a aluminum with aluminum. That's why you have this part for the inner wheel and this length for the outer wheel. But the reason that the inner wheel doesn't really change your stud length, you can see in the threads at the end. Now, even though the steel wheel is shorter, this guy presses up against the steel wheel and the threads are way back in there, whereas the one with the aluminum wheel is actually able to reach in through the aluminum and still utilize the inside wheel. So after all this work, I'm realizing that didn't help us at all. Now, another difference I learned, I'm getting a bud wheel education in all this, is there's two styles of these inner cap nuts. One like this, where the threads go all the way to the end and get you maximum engagement. The other one looks more like this, where the threads are back a little further. I'm pretty sure that this would be stronger if you had a little bit longer inner stud, because you actually have that longer stretch length on the bolt. Much like on a tractor, sometimes you'll see a spacer before you put the nut on the duals. That extra stretch length increases your clamp load that you're able to achieve on that bolt, because you got a longer area to pull on. It'll hold more consistent tension. That's my understanding anyway. So after all this, I was unable to find studs that fit this truck that are a little bit longer that would be ideal. So I believe our best course of action is just to use these full thread length inner cap nuts like this guy. Obviously not the steel on steel, and not the kind that don't have the thread cleared at the end. So let's switch those tires back, put it back on all aluminums, and we'll go with all this style inner cap nut. And all I'm going to do is swap out the couple studs that are stripped on the inside and leave the rest alone. Let's get her put back together.
I think a hollow ram cylinder of a porta power will be our best way to do this. Inner pack, I guess I really mean. But because the driver's side is left-hand thread, we're already going to be in a kind of custom tooling. It's a fine thread, left-hand thread. But we have our inner wheel cap nuts, so this is an easy place to find that. What I'm planning on doing is throwing this in the lathe, shaving this lip off and cutting it off until we're flush with the threads on one of these caps that doesn't have the threads to the end. And then what I'm going to do is weld on a high strength 3/4 inch nut to the back. I'm thinking we'll probably cut this off, machine that with a good chamfer, and chamfer the nut as well. That way we can get that nice and square, put a good strong weld on there, and then we'll screw the all thread in, put the hollow ram cylinder on this, and then we'll have to have a spacer, like a piece of pipe or tubing or something on this side, so that once we put the stud in through the hub, screw this on, put the pipe on, put the porta power on, and then put a nut on the back side of this. That way when we expand that porta power, it'll draw the stud into the hub while it pushes off the hub with that steel pipe. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Let's get to do a little bit of machine work, and it'll make more sense here as you see it. If you are confused, I'm a little confused because not that I've done this, but we're going to figure out how to make it happen. So I've gotten a couple questions on my old Lodge and Shipley lathe here. I bought this after a summer of working as an intern for Case New Holland. I came back home and I found this girl on Craigslist. Puff and I, Lauren and I, my wife now, wasn't at the time, we cleaned and painted this thing, and it's just been a good shop machine for us. It's an 18 by 54 machine, 1963. I specifically wanted one of these a little bit newer, we'll call it, than like the 50s Monarchs, because I wanted a little more spindle speed. This will go 2,000 RPM with a gear drive spindle, but it sounds like it's going to take off. In my opinion, I'd still like the Monarchs a little bit more, just for whatever reason, the feel of them. That's what I learned on at Penn State. In the Ag Engineering Lab, we had a 1943 Monarch CK, I want to say it was. I think it was roughly the same size. I think it was 60-inch between center maybe, but pretty similar machine. Loved that lathe. Pretty much lived in my dorm room my freshman year watching Mr. Pete, 22, going to that shop, playing with that lathe. My good friend Seth Bish, maybe you're watching Bish, he taught me a whole lot my freshman year. I owe a lot to him. And that sort of got me my start in machining. I'm not a machinist. We're enough to be dangerous around here. We dabble in it, I would say, but I don't know how any shop is complete without a lathe. They are very useful for a lot of things. I don't have a mill here. We have a CNC mill at work if I have to have it. The lathe, in my opinion, is much more usable than a mill. A manual mill, not that you know, obviously real machinists use manual mills all the time, but to me, a manual lathe is more useful than a manual mill. I would rather be on a CNC mill for that type of work, but that's just me. So let's throw this inner wheel cap nut in. We don't care about these outside threads at this point, so I'm just gonna grab them right in the chuck, turn this down, cut the end off so we get out there to where the threads are, flip it around, cut this off, or at least taper that back and see how we can weld the nut to the back side of this. Yeah, somewhere in that 500-ish RPM range will work for us. It's pretty good. I'm gonna put the nut in there and cut a chamfer on it as well. I'm gonna try to square this nut up pretty well. Pretty good there. All right, so I faced both the nut and the cap nut, and now we can actually put them together and they don't wobble everywhere. So if we're off a little bit with our concentricity, that's really not the end of the world, but I do want them to be flat so that when the stud is in here and it's not pulling it crooked basically and trying to rip that weld off or bend the stud coming in the hub, anything like that. So I do want this to be square. I think we're there. Let's get her welded up. So in order to tack this, I'm gonna put it in the vise, and that's just gonna help hold everything square, I think. Let that cool down a little bit and give her some grinding. I think it'll work. I cleaned up our start and stop boogers in the lathe real fast. And that'll thread on there like that. And then that will left-handedly thread onto the stud. Like I said, the hollow ram enter pack on there, washers and nut on this end. All right, so we got our new 3/8 inch longer stud. Put our adapter kit tool on there. Man, I'd like to be able to get it snugged up on there to keep everything square. All right, so we're pulling a little tension against it. Put our tool in there. And then our short spacer. And then this hollow ram cylinder, I'll show you real quick what we have going on. Basically, as it expands, it's just a regular cylinder, except it'll slide over the all thread, so it's pulling away from itself as we pump it out. This one's a 12-ton, and it fits really nice. I have a 20-ton here if this won't do it. I'm gonna slip that over the back, seat it on that piece of pipe, and then I gotta spin a nut with a washer here, and we'll start pumping it out. All right, I'm just gonna stay out of the line of fire with it here. Something's happening. Watch out, Yogs. Look out. You're in the danger zone. Watch out. Watch out. It is going. Watch out. Come on, look out. We're not quite on there yet, but let's take a peek. Sure does beat beating it to death though, doesn't it? Just have that little bit more to go. She bottomed out. That worked pretty well. Our little welded up tool for that did the job. And we got a nice fresh wheel stud. Alrighty. Go ahead and adjust our brakes while it doesn't get any easier than this. This truck does have manual slack adjusters. It's kind of right before the switch to auto slacks. Honestly, what I've found, I kind of prefer the manual slacks. The auto slacks have their fair share of problems. When you're in the habit of always checking your brakes with manual slacks, you stay on top of it. And I think you, in general, keep the brakes adjusted better. If you're running a truck every day, a lot of miles, I'd say the auto slacks are probably a better choice. So what I'm gonna do is actually adjust the brake up tight to center this drum while we put the wheels on. So now it's actually snug. I'm gonna put this inner wheel on, get it held on there, because from what I can tell, and you can see it here, nothing really locates the drums too much on a stud pilot. On a hub pilot, the drum fits on the hub real nice, but these ones, they really don't seem to. So I'm gonna do that to try to center it more than just hanging here. I don't know if it helps or not, but we'll put the inner wheel on. I did get the new inner cap nuts with the full thread package, so we can make sure every inner cap nut we use has the full threads. So that's all the way on. And you can see how those inner studs, they don't come out very far. And that's the reason that those inner cap nuts reaching in is so important. Like this guy here, that's what we're looking for. So this side is the driver's side, so it's left-handed threads, lefty-tighty on these Bud wheels. I think we may need to jack the truck up a little bit. Old 3/4 torque wrench ready to go. There was lube on these threads, so we're gonna go with the 350 to 400 foot-pound and go somewhere in that vector. It should put us at 400. I also have no idea how calibrated or accurate this torque wrench is. Sure. Wouldn't you say, Odie? Right on the money. Too much! I hit that one twice with the Impacto Dacto. Apparently we went a little too high on them. That one's right there. We're basically a calibrated torque wrench. I bet a lot of damage was done to these inner studs by somebody being on there with a 1-inch gun, just giving her. We're somewhere in that 400, 450 foot-pound range, which I think is right where we want to be on the inner cap nut. We'll put the outer wheel on now, and then those bigger style lug nuts, and they go to 550 to 600 foot-pounds. Now there are combo sockets that are 1.5 inches and have the square inside them. I have that for a 1-inch drive, but I don't have that for a 3/4 drive, and we have a 3/4 drive torque wrench, and we have our 3/4 drive trusty impact here. So 1-inch drive, we're using adapters, not as helpful. Alrighty, we can start them all now. This is our highly technical jack stand 1000 torque support. These guys we do want to dial up to 600 foot-pounds, which is all this torque wrench has to give. Yeah. Whew. It's a bunch. Let's see what our calibration is. My fat 190 pounds or whatever I am these days. And 36 inches is here, so yeah. 200 pounds at 3 feet is what it's going to take, so it must be pretty close. Might as well go ahead and slap that calibrated sticker right on it. We're gonna go ahead and change the front tires. I bought some new used tires because these trucks really don't get too many miles. These tires are about 10 years old now, so that concerns me more than anything. These guys that I picked up at our local tire shop, they're only a couple years old, still have pretty decent tread on them. Let's get them swapped out. Helps to close the valve. Pull the valve core so we can dump the air. Huh. Apparently it's not happy. Cat did a really good job at holding that air in. Hitting her with a little lube package. It's a good thing these wheels need polish because we're giving them a workout. Oh my God. Oh. Thing is stiff. And check the kingpins out. Seems like everything's pretty good there. Man, looks like the first time I've ever touched a tire. There it is. We get this thing to seat. I left the valve core out. Oh, no way. Kind of stand off to the side. A handy dandy locker. Watch out, boys and boys. Goofballs. We got to show our viewers our cool new wet line setup. So one of our next projects here on the LTL in the shop mission, I'm going to put a wet line on it. I picked up a new PTO and pump from our local driveline store. If you're curious, you can get yourself your very own brand new wet line setup for about $2,000. This is separate piece. This bolts on the bottom of the transmission. This gear is always turning, and then when the PTO engages this gear in the back, you can see that fork on it, it slides over. When this goes on the transmission, you have to shim the distance that this is to set the backlash on this gear. That's done by just putting more gaskets on here.
All right, guys, that wraps up this portion of the Ford mission. On the next one, we'll get into installing the wet line. I thought I could do this all in one video, but it's getting so long that I don't think that's going to be possible. So I'm going to chop it here. Stay tuned for the next video on the mighty Ford LTL, where we get into installing our brand new wet line, PTO, the tank, all that jazz. Plenty of work coming up. Stay tuned. I'm Sam with Scrappy Industries. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button below to support our rescuing of old scrap, trucks, equipment, whatever it may be. We appreciate your support. Thanks again.